Dennis Barron. Dennis?
All right.
Dennis comes to us from the city of East Peoria, Illinois, where for the last few years he's been the Public Works Director for the city of East Peoria, Illinois. Before that, he was their Potable Water Division Manager.
Yeah,
And
water and
before-
wastewater.
Yep, and before that, he has an extensive career in the potable water industry. So Dennis is now on week 3 with us. I think he's glad he brought some of his warm clothes with him from Illinois.
Yeah, and the weather.
And Chris is laughing at us saying, you guys think this is.
Right, exactly.
It was only 7 this weekend up there, so
Oh,
yeah, it's, you know,
Balmy.
that was the high.
Whew.
I
So
don't
you'll be
miss-
seeing more of Dennis as Public Works items come in front of City Council.
Okay.
Well,
So with that, we'll jump into the council briefing. The first item we have on the agenda is discussion and approval of staff to proceed with finding a permanent and primary special magistrate for code enforcement hearings. And here to discuss that issue with you is City Attorney Chris Ambrosio.
Thank you. So I tend to bring briefing topics to your attention when they are items that would require the council's approval or, very big, large projects. And this qualifies as both in my book. One, the council would and does have the authority to appoint and approve the hiring of a special magistrate for code enforcement hearings. We currently have an alternate special magistrate in place, and we do not technically have a permanent and regular special magistrate. And there have been some occasions where the special magistrate hearings, which are advertised as being scheduled for the 4th Wednesday of every month at 2 o'clock, have been changed, and sometimes with short notice. And the alternate magistrate, she never necessarily committed to providing her services on a regular basis as a permanent, regular magistrate, but agreed to occupy the position as an alternate. But the importance of, or I should say that the problems with a changing schedule with respect to code enforcement hearings. One, there's a lot of parties that are affected. The public. The public should have a regular schedule that when advertised, they can count on that as the reliable schedule as they're allowed to appear. 2, of course, the alleged violator, code violator, should be able to count on a hearing that won't be changed unless maybe for emergency purposes. Also, the clerk's office needs a regular and consistent schedule to rely on. The code enforcement officer needs that as well. And the city attorney's office, with respect to any assistance or help that I would provide to the code enforcement officer or in any way prepping for the hearing. But these are all parties. I should add also clerk's office assigns, of course, a clerk to the hearing. And the police department assigns a bailiff for the hearing. So there are many, many people involved in the special magistrate code enforcement hearings. And we have that set as 4th Wednesday at 2. The alternate would remain in the scenario I'm about to explain. I don't want anyone to perceive this as terminating the alternate magistrate's agreement. That's not what I'm suggesting. But what I'm suggesting and asking for the council's approval is to go about finding a law firm that is qualified with multiple attorneys that can provide the regular, permanent, special magistrate services so that they would be, that firm and those qualified attorneys would be the set of attorneys that would always provide for the hearing on the 4th Wednesday at 2 o'clock. And when there's a primary attorney from that firm that's unable to attend and respond to the materials and prep for the matters, then the second attorney within that firm would step in, guaranteeing us of a set 4th Wednesday at 2 o'clock hearing. And then, if necessary, the alternate can also be used. So between having the alternate and a primary firm providing those services, we should always have the 4th Wednesday at 2 hearing set. unless, of course, there's no need for a hearing. And as George, our code enforcement director, says, ideally, we don't have special magistrate hearings because we're having, we're gaining enforcement without the use of a special magistrate. That's the ideal situation. But when it's necessary, of course, I've been discussing it with other department heads, and they feel that that's needed as well, so that we don't change the schedule. We have a permanent set of attorneys on hand. So, of course, I would need your instruction to go about finding a qualified firm that would provide us with competitive rates and reasonable rates, and then bring that back to the council for approval. Because ultimately, the council would have to approve the agreement, with the magistrate.
What's the usual and customary for this kind of thing? Is it an hourly or a
Well,
retainer?
I've seen both, Mayor. I've seen hourly for approximate 200 per hour. That's what we currently have on the agreement with the alternate special magistrate. And then I've also seen flat rates. I would say a general number of $3,000, for example, per month, which it really just is typically for one hearing. But keeping in mind that the magistrate needs to adequately prepare for a hearing, handle the hearing, and then there's post-hearing activities as well, further review, drafting of the order. So there is more work involved than just attending the hearing. But yeah, so I've seen hourly rates for 200 and flat rates for 3,000. And of course, if there's no hearing, then we shouldn't be charged.
Do we know how many times the magistrate sat last year?
Yeah, so again, currently, we've only had the alternate special magistrate sitting for the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And for 2018, she had hearings on every month except for 3. But she did have a month where there was an additional hearing. And that's another consideration, is there may be certain events where we would need a hearing that wasn't normally scheduled. We need to schedule a special hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be to our benefit to have multiple attorneys available, so that if one of our fire department requests a special hearing, we have attorneys. So she had hearings on almost every month, except for 3, but she had 2 in 1 month.
Right. So I'm just trying to do the math. So if you did the 3,000, it'd be 36,000
Right.
a year. Whereas if we did 9 or 10 hearings, how many hours would they put into it? Do you think per hearing?
Yeah,
Like,
we calculated about 3.5 to 5, and it's hard to
so
predict.
that's $7,200.
I know,
So it's a big difference.
big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have an estimate from our finance department that shows the special magistrate in 2017, the invoice was for $4,300, and then the invoice for the 2018 fiscal year was for $10,650. And these included her work related to hearings, drafting orders, and also communications that were necessary and relevant to her magistrate work.
Mhm.
And that was for 10 days, 10 hearings.
10 hearings, right, yeah. So yeah, the hourly fee of 200 for this current alternate special magistrate, I would say, is a very reasonable fee.
Sure.
Yeah,
Can I
so-
go way back to what
Sure.
happened to the permanent special magistrate?
Yeah, good question. And so Anne will be able to answer that a little bit better, because that was a very short-lived experience.
Well, the city's had a history of special magistrates, and most of them have been selected through our city attorney, Susan Erdley, participating in the selection of those special magistrates. And I can't remember Sonia's last name, but she was our special magistrate for quite some time. She ended up resigning, and so at that point we went out to recruit a new special magistrate. And I don't know if y'all remember Angela Gale came before you guys and you appointed her. Well, she served for several months, and then of course she got a permanent judgeship somewhere, so she quit. So to being our special magistrate. So it's a difficult position in that regards that it's not full-time work. And a lot of these, you know, when you get the attorneys in here, they end up, you know, getting something better or whatever, or moving on. And so I think that's one of the dilemmas, and, you know, Chris's suggestion with the firm kind of alleviates that. So we didn't really have our official special magistrate for a long period of time before we had to dip into the alternate.
And then a final concern of mine is just the fundamental due process concerns where if as I've been on board, we had an event where apparently there was some confusion and some of the parties weren't certain as to when the hearing was scheduled for, and it had actually been changed. And so as your attorney, I'm just, you know, wanting to prevent any claims of a due process violation and a failure to provide, you know, a proper hearing. So these are all my concerns. I bring it to you on briefing because I'd like to get your approval to commit some more time to moving forward with getting some proposals from potentially qualified firms and bring them back to you either in briefing, if you like, for consideration and discussion with respect to a firm serving as a primary and regular set of qualified special magistrates and keeping the current alternate magistrate. And I spoke to Ms. Haig, our current alternate special magistrate. She's been fully informed of this briefing, the topics of the briefing, and she understands, and she's still ready to serve and able to help the city. Absolutely.
Have you put it out to bid to anybody yet?
We did. I've looked into 2 so far, and then that's when I kind of slowed down and I said, Mike, you know, spending some time on this, I think I should ask my bosses if I should continue spending the time on it. But the answer is yes. So the first that I looked into is the current special magistrate for City of Atlantic Beach, and he has a prohibited dual office conflict where a special magistrate can't serve as a special magistrate for 2 municipalities. That position is considered a public office, so he can't serve. He's prohibited in their contract anyhow, and so that didn't work out. And then, frankly, I contacted Brenda Durden, attorney for Atlantic Beach, and her office has qualified attorneys, or attorneys I think that would be able to, you know, stand up to the task and serve us. I received a proposal from them, and the proposal was for the $3,000 a month. So,
I don't think that I do.
Does this
Can't go to like an RFQ? Do we have to do like an RFQ or something for this, or can we just
we
go
could
out?
we could go out, but it's also it's legal services, and so our legal service we obtain legal services as an exemption. So if it gets to the point where we want to get a broader, you know, throw out a broader net, we could put together a RFQ.
What's the firm that she's with?
The firm that she's with, and that firm has actually done work for us before on other matters, pension matters, for example, Lewis, Longman, and Walker. We have them on. We have had them on invoices and statements through the finance department where they've, you know, provided us with legal services before. And then, of course, the attorneys within that firm, you know, they wouldn't be able to provide special magistrate services to another local government if they were ours, because then that would be the dual office conflict that Jeb is special
When
magistrate.
Ms. Haig billed hours, it averaged between 3 and 5 hours from start to finish for each of those 10 hearings?
She has, I would say the hearing average is 2.5 hours.
Right.
Then she typically has an hour with respect to our orders, and also half an hour to an hour with respect to communications.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 3, 4, 5 hours a hearing
Right, for all collective work, yeah.
times 10 at 200 an hour.
It's 10,000.
It's 10,000 a year.
That's right. And
So the
that's,
firm that you talked to proposed 36,000.
So is 200 an hour realistic with a firm? Do we,
With a firm, I don't think that's realistic,
What would be?
unfortunately.
but that's what you're asking to do.
Right, and I have to find the needle in the haystack.
But what's reasonable? I mean, is 300
Three,
or?
350.
Yeah, I would say so, Mayor, right. Yeah.
It's because, I've spoken to a couple lawyers from that firm, so I knew that you had reached out to somebody because they called me.
Yeah,
I think the conflict issue is why a firm charges more money, is because they can't take other clients.
Sure.
I know that they have to do some due diligence with a couple of their clients that they have in order to be able to represent our city. So that's, I think, one of the sticking points probably for a firm.
I agree. And you know, they're looking at the alternative work that they would be doing if they weren't performing special magistrate services. And in their mind, they're probably thinking, we could be serving a corporate client on a matter and billing them $700 an hour. I mean, on the far end, but they are looking at where could we spend those hours alternatively if we weren't City of Jacksonville Beach's special magistrate.
And do you have any concerns that if, you know, if it's a firm where you may not have the same person every time, that then you don't have some consistency and also the understanding of our codes and then also too, maybe it does require them more time, and if they're billing by the hour versus somebody who's been doing it for a while and they may not have to put in as much time, you know, because of their familiarity.
Yeah, I looked at it in two ways. One, I did consider that. But I also considered that attorneys within the same firm, under the same roof, can benefit from each other. So if one attorney ended up handling 80% or 70%, for example, of our hearings, and the other attorney handled 20 or 30%, they can teach each other. And there are benefits that both attorneys can gain and lessons that they can teach each other. So there's that situation, but then there's also some value that they can gain from helping direct each other, not making the same mistakes again. Whereas, you know, if you had one attorney if you had one attorney in your scenario, Counselor, that's a good point, is that, you know, we would have this consistency, he or she would be familiar with our code. We'd hope that the backup attorney within that firm would be just as familiar and just as capable of handling the hearing matters. And hopefully, as I thought it through, I thought hopefully that backup will learn from the primary, watch the videos, they'll actually sit down with each other and learn from each other. So there's some pros and cons. Pros and cons.
For any firm to have a professional relationship with somebody on council with a conflict of interest.
That's right.
I have at least 3 in Jacksonville, and I'm sure Mr. Goldberg probably got some too. that we're
Right.
not communicating.
Right, and each firm has to run its conflict check. And we have to rely on their conflict check and then their guarantee to us that they have found no conflicts. And I discussed it with that firm in that, you know, they would have to take the time to run due diligence, conflict check, advise us of any, and basically take themselves out of the running if there's anything that's prohibited.
So is it the alternative now, which is I guess she's de facto not the alternative, because there's no primary?
Yeah, she is the alternate, and she recognizes that's the agreement. She has no dispute that she's the alternate, but you know, she invoices herself as alternate special magistrate. Her agreement calls her designates her as alternate, and she's absolutely still in position, ready to perform, and you know, has no problem doing that.
But are we employing her through her firm?
No, it's just she's just a solo.
So
Right.
She's a magistrate in Jacksonville too,
Oh,
for traffic court.
oh, she is, okay.
With it.
To help
I
you.
thought, yeah, how can we do two?
Yeah, we need to look into that actually.
Angela Gale was too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we have a firm on retainer at $3,000 a month potentially, if there isn't a hearing that month.
Right. Well. if-
Wait, no, what, right?
Right.
We're paying them?
No, if we had a contract, we would certainly have in that contract that they would not be paid anything
Okay.
if there was no hearing.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not just a blanket payment every single one.
And do we
Without
know-
performing any work.
That'd be nice.
Nothing surprises me.
Do we know what causes the conflict or the reasons that she has to change the hearings?
There's been different reasons. Do you know some of the reasons?
Maybe, I don't know, the clerk's office arranges it, something like that.
Yeah.
Other cases, maybe?
I'm not sure of all the various reasons why there have been changes.
Because I guess the only thing I'm thinking is, well, okay, if we paid her a little bit more, does that help? I don't know,
Right.
Yeah, would she be interested, and have you talked to her about becoming the magistrate?
The primary magistrate,
Yeah.
we did touch on that topic, and it appears that she might be able to assume that role,
Mhm.
but that doesn't necessarily, for us, clear up a potential of hearings being changed, hearing dates being changed in the future. And that doesn't afford us the chance of a backup attorney the way that a firm might provide us with a backup attorney. Because it still keeps her in her singular and solo position where if she needs to not, if she
Yeah,
needs
but I
to
would
change.
suggest to add an alternative.
Yeah, but I
right?
wouldn't
Yeah.
just fill that alternate position.
Yeah,
I mean,
we could-
she's been missing meetings, but she's been the alternate, so there is no backup after that.
Right,
So
there's no backup.
right.
if we fill those two, then that should serve as a function of the
That's
firm,
another
you're
option.
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we wanted to take a different route, we could have two separate attorneys under contract
Mhm.
and hope that solves the problem of not, changing out the fourth Wednesday.
But that's what we had previously, two
Right.
different attorneys under contract,
Correct,
and one of them just left
right.
us short-staffed, and so that's why.
Mhm. And so we never changed, the city never changed her designation in her contract from alternate to primary. And quite frankly, I don't know if at the time that all this has been occurring, if she ever wanted to assume the primary, because she's just been wanting to operate under the alternate agreement.
Well,
And I think that,
we could hire somebody to be the primary and she could be the alternate. She's very comfortable with being the alternate. But
Right.
It's
Mhm.
far less expensive to go
Yeah.
primary alternate rather than permanent.
and maybe one of the issues here is, not so much what the specific direction is that we need to go, but Chris wanted to make sure that you were all okay with him exploring the options and the possible combinations and probably coming back with what he feels is the best recommendation for the organization moving forward.
Or
And that might
potential
be
options.
Potential options, saying, we can either go Route A, Route B, or Route C. Here's the three options and get your input as to which way to go.
Right.
Yeah.
Based on his
So we have,
exploration.
right, we have this situation. I wanted to advise you of it. Should I spend more time moving forward trying to shore up this situation that we have and come back to you with options?
My suggestion too, if we went the firm route, would be about half the price.
Yeah.
1,500 a hearing is still 250 an hour if they spent more than that. It's average of 5 hours.
Right.
So they're getting almost
300.
300 an hour for 15, a hearing. It's not too bad.
Yep. I'm looking, that's right on track with what I was trying to aim for as well. And anything that comes up, which is going to charge the city $36,000 a year.
Well, and if the problem we're trying to solve is consistency on the hearings,
Mhm, that's
and we
the
can
point.
solve that within the current structure by just fixing the current structure, I think we should explore that. If there's something else that makes going to the firm more attractive, then that's a different story. But if the problem we're trying to solve is the hearings, then.
Yeah, and that's, that was the first attempt that I made, which was to get Jeb Branham, who's an experienced special magistrate, to see if there was a way to hire somebody like that, so we would have two attorneys, a primary and then the alternate, who's already experienced with us. But I was kind of thwarted in that because you can't have that situation. So, but they're inevitably, if I put more time into it, we will find qualified attorneys that can provide us with affordable special magistrate services.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we definitely need to act on it. I mean, since we only have one now, if she's sick or can't do it, then
Right.
we're in trouble.
Yeah, we need to, magistrates. So I'll keep working on it. Okay,
Yes.
add it to the list.
You're still up here for the next one, right?
Yeah.
So the next one is regarding the city's purchasing policy, and staff in the city attorney's office desire to start making some substantive changes to that policy based on its age, language that it contains. Chris, again, wanted a few minutes of your time because this is not just spending 4 hours in one day to go in and make some tweaks to the purchasing policy. Our document is very large to begin with, and this is going to require some comprehensive time to be spent on it. We wanted to talk with you a little bit about some of the big ticket items that we would look to address within the policy. You should have all been sent a bullet list, one page, with some of the highlights that he and the CFO, Ashley, would be looking to make changes with, as well as Lewis and Lennon.
I don't know,
So-
I'm not sure that
I
we
didn't
did.
know.
I didn't give that. Nope,
Like a week and a half ago?
might have been last year.
I'll send
I
it
sent it
out.
to you last year. Yeah.
I have a
Um,
briefly revised and I can email it tonight.
We'll make sure you all get it. But again, Chris wanted the opportunity to make sure that you're all comfortable with starting this process before we spend too much time on it, and why it's important for us to do it.
Right. So the topic is the revision to our purchasing manual, which I suggest is retitled as our purchasing policy. And the policy needs significant revision. Also revision to our purchasing code. We have a very brief code that fails to address a lot of important topics that should be, and issues that should be codified as our local code and our local law. Ashley and Lewis and I have had several meetings where we already set the manual to the side and the code and our purchasing code to the side. We've started to address some of the inefficiencies and also the deficiencies and topics and areas that are either outdated, not addressed at all, or just not properly and thoroughly addressed. And I just have to say that, in my opinion, I think both the manual and the code need a lot of work and revision. It benefits all the departments citywide. It brings clarity to businesses and people doing business with the city. It codifies very, very important laws and rules that guide our procurement and purchasing, helps protect the city, provides fairness in the purchasing and procurement field, and gives direction, guidance to staff, and so that all city departments are operating under the same structure and a comprehensive and complete and well understood, well stated policy and code. So there's no more confusion among the departments, and there's a standardization. So, some of the examples of the topics that aren't, I think, properly covered are that let's just say the topic of protecting the city, insurances. How are the insurances come into play? What are required? Bonds, when they're required, and in which circumstances they're required. Those are just two of the areas that are very important for the city when it comes to contracting and purchasing. And I want to make sure that there's no confusion both in the code and again, I'm calling it a policy because it should be a purchasing policy. There should be no confusion for any of the departments as well as any of the entities doing business with the city. There's also clarifications that are needed with respect to all the different standard forms of solicitation or procurement documents, the RFPs, invitations to bid, the RFQs. I think all of those need rework and revision, and those go hand in hand with our policy and our code because they all speak to one another, so that if we're citing to a bid protest procedure in our code, and that needs to be laid out and codified, that also would be matched with the bid protest procedure that's in our solicitation documents. So there's a lot of empty spaces in our purchasing and procurement world, and they need to be worked on and revised. And that is, Mike's right, it's going to be a substantial project. So this is another topic that I wanted to bring to your attention, because this is going to be labor intensive, and it involves me, Ashley, and Lewis. And it's already involved us on 3 to 4 meetings, just so that we can get a general understanding of where are we going with this and what are the needs of these governing documents. And we realized now was the time for me to come before you and bring it to you as a briefing matter, because we recognize this is going to take a long time. And it's due. A lot of this hasn't been looked at for 12 years. For example, our manual is from 2008. A lot has changed. Public records laws have changed with respect to procurement, construction documents, service documents. I mean, there's a lot of statutory provisions that need to be referenced, and there's just a lot of codification work that we need to do. Fortunately, a lot of other Florida municipalities have outstanding purchasing codes, and they're updated and they're revised, and we can utilize a lot of their language. So we won't be reinventing the wheel. Ashley, Lewis, and I have already started researching other cities with the most up-to-date purchasing codes. The 3 of us have started to compile those most up-to-date municipal codes, and we're going to utilize a lot of their language. So we won't be required to redraft an entire code, but really adopt in our code. Of course, for your review.
You may want to just quickly talk about the bottom bullet about the time frame that you all anticipate. So council has a good idea.
Yeah, so the time frame, we said we should take over a year. So, again, because our departments are so busy, it's not like we can just work on this every single day. But when we're able to work on this individually and then also together, and again, Lewis, Ashley, and myself, we anticipate that this is going to be a greater than a year-long process.
Do you have the bandwidth to be able to tackle that?
I'm trying to find it.
That's kind of where my concern is. We're doing a whole bunch of stuff, a lot of it goes through you and the other departments. I don't know if we have the capacity as an organization to be able to do this and do the regular stuff that the city needs to have done.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing the visioning, the strategic plan, LDC, all of this stuff, and so like there's just a lot of big things that are going on. And let's say we were to hire support staff or be able to.
Are we able to farm that out? Even?
Yeah.
Like for something like this, you don't really have to have a knowledge of the city. Like the LDC and other particular things that we want you to focus on, and staff's important because you have to have a knowledge of the city. But with something like this, like you said, you're not reinventing the wheel. You're finding several other up-to-date codes. You pull from that and begin to structure our own.
Right.
Is that something that you can farm out so that you and Ashley and Lewis aren't tasked with doing that for over a year, and it's something we can get done and for a reasonable cost? It sounds like it wouldn't be too crazy.
Yeah, we could. We would still have to work with that attorney or specialist, whoever we hired, because, for example, as Ashley and Lewis and I are discussing some of the nuances of the manual and the history of how particular portions have actually played out in real time for us with respect to certain things that departments have done or lessons that Ashley's department has learned, we would have to work in conjunction with that person in some way for situations that are unique to us, and only Ashley has that information. As I was charging through one chapter of the manual, Ashley said, "Wait a minute, I have to comment on these topics here," because she had the background of how those particular issues are handled through her finance department. So the answer is yes, but we would need, all three of us would need to work with that person.
It seems like you're prioritizing the stuff that we need, that we're asking you to do, and that this has kind of jumped out as a big issue. Do you think this is an important one that needs to be tackled before some of the others?
I think in terms of the large projects that I'm working on, this is, I would say, in the top 10 of large projects in terms of need, because we're, in my opinion, we're too deficient in the code, and the manual is too outdated. And we, in my opinion, we need to get to addressing those soon, because the activity and the business of the city goes on every day. And it is active, and we're in the middle of it every single day. And I'm dealing with departments' contracts and leases and their business transactions, and our department interactions with companies that are doing business with us. And what brought this to my overall concern was I realized that on a daily and weekly basis, as I'm dealing with all the other departments' business activities, I keep going back to a manual that's way outdated, a code that doesn't serve us as well as a proper code should. So it is an important topic to me, because I see it every day and every week working with the departments, and being the attorney that's got eyes on all the city business, this has been drawn out as an area of concern for me, because it's a daily need.
Well, there's other things as well that spring to mind. Like, for example, we've been talking about our contracts, the way that we actually contract city work out, and we've all talked before about putting more responsibility on the contractors, and be that through penalties or whatever else. It just seems that our contracts don't have a lot of teeth when it comes to making people accountable. And I know a lot of, especially when it comes to construction, that affects our citizens a lot. And that's something that they care about. So I know what you're talking about is larger than that specific item, but it's part of it.
That's right.
So, like Corey was saying, I mean, I don't know if we can prioritize things.
Maybe one of the things that I need to do is, if you remember back in, I think it was September, we did the matrix of all the city council priorities and laid those out over about a 3-year window.
Mm-hmm.
I probably need to get back with Chris, if you're all in agreement with him that the purchasing policy needs to be on that chart, then we need to go back and figure out what the time frame is, and then talk with he and I, Aaron, Bill, the other directors that are all involved, as to how the resources need to be allocated to try and achieve these goals in the most reasonable time frame. Maybe some of the other items that we have indicated we might need some outside assistance on.
I think,
when it comes to
it was a
comp
consensus, like the LDC was like at least at the top of our list, which
Yeah.
that's a huge undertaking. So for you to think that we're going to tackle that and this policy
I know.
plus other stuff, it doesn't seem like we have anywhere near the bandwidth to do that. And I would support trying to find somebody to pay to do it, to get it done, so you guys can continue to focus on what our priority was
Right.
as far as the LDC goes.
And
With the LDC, that one wasn't until, I think, a year and a half out. So certainly, what I think
There were-
I
there
like
were
your
cleanup-
idea of doing the matrix, and you
Yeah.
should superimpose the matrix that we did on top of that, so this way we can see, make sure that we're not asking everything from you at the same time, or everything from planning at the same time, so we're spreading out the rush of work throughout the department.
As an example, the LDC had a very distinctive sequence.
Right.
There was the cleanup items of all of the ordinances that needed to be wrapped up, which Bill actually has going back to the Planning Commission on January 27th. They'll come back to you probably at some point in February. Once we do that cleanup, then we start taking a look at, I think it's the comp plan after that, or the year, I think is what's next.
I thought it was the
Yeah.
vision, the strategic, and then
We
we
have
figured
vision,
out that stuff out, then we do the
Vision,
comp plan.
strategic plan, but there's definitely definitive sequences, of which the LDC, I think, is in the latter half of that. But at least everything is laid out sequentially, but we probably need to go back and see where's the purchasing policy fit within this 3-year window, and what are the resources needed? Is it in-house? Is it an outside resource, or is there something else we can assign an outside resource to so that internally we have the bandwidth to dedicate to it because we're the best ones suited to do it?
Right, and I was under the impression that we may have a specialist for the LDC work.
That's a
So-
possibility.
So if that's the case, then that'll open up a little bit of more opportunity for me. And I'm more of a specialist in public entity procurement and purchasing than I am in an LDC tax, revision. So if I agree we should do that, matrix, and then also utilize my higher specialties where we can. So, but yeah, we need to work it out. There's a lot of projects. It's just that this is a concern of mine, as I said, because this is a daily, ongoing, governing set of documents with respect to the city business that I see every single day. I get calls and documents from all of our departments all week long. So,
And that, all of that other stuff is bigger picture, more public and a little sexier, but if the staff trying to implement all of those things that we're trying to do is wading through a puddle of mud in this policy, then
yeah.
it doesn't do, even that other work is not gonna be as well implemented if
Yeah.
we're being held up with this internally.
Right, yeah, this is a big project because our contracts need strengthening. We need provisions and clauses there that I've found are missing, or they're not correctly written, or they're poorly written. Our solicitation documents, again, are RFPs, RFQs, those need to be worked. We actually reviewed our purchase order language, that needs to be reworked, and then overall, the entire city purchasing policy and code. So it is a big project, and they all go hand in hand, and this is an ongoing one of our large projects.
I assume there's organizations like Association of City Managers or Association of City Attorneys. Do they have those kind of services that they provide cities where you could go in there and have them set some templates in place with current policies?
I don't know if the city managers have that.
For
but-
that, it's just a matter of putting a call out through FCCMA and seeing who's recently redone their purchasing policy, and then asking to take a look at their documents. So,
Right.
Like Chris said, it's not so much reinventing the wheel as much as it is finding the right pieces of the wheel to create ours.
Right.
And each of these documents is probably anywhere from 50 to 100 pages in size, maybe in some cases larger. And it's, doing all of that research to say, this is the best one for owner direct purchasing that applies to us.
Right.
And this is the best, but you got to read multiple examples, tweak the one that you want, and then say, this is our piece of this particular puzzle.
Yeah, and an example, Mayor, is like our code, our purchasing code is approximately a page and a half. I looked at 5 other cities that I've represented and their purchasing code, and their purchasing code is approximately 12 pages. And I don't mean that it has to be long. It is just evidence to me that it is comprehensive, and it addresses the topics of purchasing and procurement by a municipality. That indicates to me that that size difference shows the areas that aren't being properly addressed in our code, in our purchasing code. We as a team, the 3 of us, we can adopt and just cut and paste literally all of the different codes from the other cities that are proper, up to date, effective, efficient, work for us, and we just adopt them as well, into ours. So it's, and by adopt, I mean, cut and paste, and here's our new code. They work, they're tried and true, and they're being used by 100 different municipalities throughout the state. So, yeah, it is a matter of putting pieces together, but Councilor Vogel was saying, right, I mean, this is a big job, and it's a lot of work, so.
In the other organizations as potential resources, we get an award every year for financial management from the,
GFO, FGO.
is that a potential resource organization?
You have 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So should we do a matrix, or I guess I would need your instruction as to the importance level of this project and where it fits into the larger projects that we're doing in conjunction with the daily business that we do, that the city attorney does every day. So,
Is there anything that stands out? Sorry.
I was gonna ask Mike if you had any thoughts on,
I think this needs to be put in the pot with the rest of the projects that council has identified, because Chris is right, as, you know, Ashley and I had spoken about before Chris got here, that it was an antiquated policy. Chris has now had an opportunity to put eyes on it. And he's right from the perspective that it affects this organization on a daily basis, whereas some of the other issues that we're looking at are very much long-term visioning and some long-term strategy for the city. And this is like asking people to do work with a 386 computer. It just doesn't have the horsepower to do what it needs to do, and in that vacuum it creates issues. So if we could, you know, get this under our belt in some reasonable time frame, it's a tool that enhances the entire organization going forward, and then some of these other items will be right in line with it. So, you know, I guess, you know, in hearing the council's feedback, I'd like Chris and I to go back and see how that matrix can be modified, where the purchasing policy can be embedded with the other projects, see where it falls in from a timeline perspective, and come back with you and talk about where we think we need to contract services versus what we've got for bandwidth in-house to get these projects done.
And you can include priorities for these, you know, in fact, I like Corey's comments about prioritizing this, so when it comes back, we're not just looking at how the time fits, but
Right.
also, this is our number one issue, this is our number two issue.
right. And just so the council knows, so in the interim, as the matters come to my attention, I've been trying to patch the holes that I find. For example, you know, when a contract comes in or an amendment is suggested, I'm trying to bring those up to 2020 standards and bringing in the provisions and clauses that protect the city and that the city needs with respect to contracting relationships. So we may not have it codified or in a set policy, but I'm plugging the holes as they come in sporadically. So we'll continue to do that.
But the problem is you're spending that much time on every contract when you shouldn't have to,
I know,
yeah.
yeah,
and that's gonna continue until it's fixed.
yeah, we
You
need,
know what I mean? Like you're having to analyze and pull stuff out for every project when you should have a quality template in the first place.
that's right, that's right. Quality templates for all the documents that we utilize.
And it's that many opportunities for something to slip through without getting caught.
Yeah.
That's the other issue.
But Lewis and Ashley have been a great help in, we're working as a team for trying to watch out for each other and protect the city. Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for taking so much time.
Yeah, actually, you're right on schedule.
Okay. And if there's any extra time, I'll be glad to answer.
Well, actually, if there's extra time, I've got, we do have a special guest there. Before I go to them, there are a handful of items I'd just like to walk through with you really quickly. And if you have questions, you can either call me or email me afterwards just to get a little bit more information. But I wanted to walk through a few things with y'all before I turn it over to Bill and Cliff Shepherd. The first is, you may have seen an email recently that the police department released their annual police statistics. And if you looked at that data, you will see that there was roughly a 10% increase in calls for service and a 10% increase in dispatched officers for service. Chief Smith is going to do a deeper dive into what that increase in calls translated to, what types of calls were they. And we're planning on coming back at a future briefing in probably the next 2 months or so to walk you through the analysis of those statistics. So we've got a little better handle as to what it actually means. Second item, the community visioning starts up on Thursday evening. First session will be here at City Hall. We've actually got a full group for that one. We've got 15 people signed up. There's a total of 6 meetings identified. It would be nice to have at least one council member for each of those meetings. Chris Wright will be sending out an email to each of you tomorrow to see if there's an opportunity for you to attend one of those meetings. The third item that I have on here is, I mentioned it earlier, all of the cleanup ordinances. This goes back to the ordinance package that was presented to council back in fall of 2018, where that ordinance package in its entirety was denied. That ordinance package, along with a handful of other cleanup items, is all starting to run through the process to come back in front of council. So that's the cleanup from fall of 2018. That's front yard fences on 4-lane state roads. It's food trucks and I think a couple other things in there. At the end of April or beginning of May, we're going to do the budget assumptions again, similar to last year, where before the city starts assembling the budget, I will walk you through what assumptions we're using for that budget preparation. And at that point, if there's anything that you want to discuss from a big ticket item, we can have the conversation and see if you want to change the strategic direction from budget prep. To let you know, we have identified that we have Brazilian pepper in Cradle Creek Preserve. We've got somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5, 6, 7 areas where the Brazilian pepper is starting to grow into some substantial area. We are working with Felicia Boyd, Program and Outreach Director from the Timaquan Parks Foundation, to try and put together some nonprofit activities to help us go in there and remove that Brazilian pepper before it gets too invasive and it becomes too large of a project to do. Already mentioned it once, our new Public Works Director, Dennis Barron, is here in-house. I think, Phil, you're the only one who didn't get a chance to meet him yet.
Do we have any idea how it got there? Were there any construction projects close by? Were there any,
No idea.
sod or any transplanting?
For Cradle Creek?
Yes.
No, not in terms of
It's
any,
just what-
any just red flags that we throw how they got in there, because the first cropping or area was pretty far out in the park. So it could have been animal droppings.
Right, okay.
Typically, that's what it is.
Yeah.
We have a new communications manager, Jacob Board. He comes to us from the nonprofit industry. He will be starting with us on January 27th. What's that? Yeah, the nonprofit center to serve nonprofits. That's the let's see. For those of you who may not know, Alan Putnam was voted to be the FMEA president, and his movement into that position was actually accelerated due to the resignation of the previous president from his employment with his municipality. So Alan is now serving as the FMEA president at this time. The last 3 things I've got on here for you, legislative updates that we receive. Would you all like to receive those updates when we get them in the City Hall so that you can all see what's going on? And track them.
Yes.
Okay.
There's also calls every Monday at 9 o'clock.
I heard you this morning.
I heard you this morning too.
Let's see, the next one I have on here is Florida League of Cities Legislative Action Days. I know that there's at least one additional council member in addition to the mayor who wants to go. I'm not sure if that's something you all want to talk about as a group to decide how many you feel is appropriate to go to that, or if it should just be the mayor representing the city. But that's clearly a policy decision for this body.
What's the date?
February
It
11th
is
and 12th.
February 11th and 12th, a Tuesday and a Wednesday.
We have an accreditation team on campus.
I have board meeting on set.
And
I mean, I've got to be there for the League of Mayors, Board of Directors, so, I mean, whoever wants to come.
I mean, I'm probably gonna be up there too.
Okay.
You know, I'll circle back with you.
What is it, Friday thing?
Don't tell
Oh,
us.
no.
Oh, pass.
Sounds like Amanda knows what he's
I
talking
didn't
about.
say that you expressed an interest as well, so it may be you, Corbin, and Sandy, might be the 3 of you. Okay. And then last but not least, this is one just to make you aware of. We're not sure how big of an issue it might turn into. One of the things that we've realized is that with contracting our fire service to JFRD, now that we're getting into a special event season, JFRD handles their assignment of EMS to special events differently than the city of Jacks Beach does. Jacks Beach would have our fire department sit down with the police department and make a determination of what was needed for coverage at a special event. As I've been briefed by the fire marshal and our special events, Kathy Butler, the city of Jacksonville actually has a schedule of assumed attendance and what resources they deploy based on the number of people. So the first one that I know raised a flag was with regards to Sam Veal with his upcoming festival, when he found out that Jacksonville was originally going to charge him 3 times as much as what the city of Jacksonville Beach does. After they talked about it a little bit more in the event itself, Jacksonville ultimately lowered their required presence on site but it's something we can anticipate perhaps for the next 8, 10, 12 months as we go through our first cycle. We may have some people who have special events that say, why am I paying more this year than I did in previous years? And it's because Jacksonville actually dictates what resources are needed based on crowd size and what they feel is appropriate for their coverage. So we'll see where that goes. But that's the first one that we heard of. I thought you all would want to be aware of that. So if there's any questions on anything I've just run through, feel free to give me a call tomorrow or later in the week. We can go through them. With that, I'm now going to ask Bill Mann to come up to the table.
Okay, I just want to say one thing as well, that was on my mind.
Yep.
Can we get somebody from FDOT to come out and survey our traffic lights around the city? Because a lot of them are on their way out. I noticed on...
So in terms of the quality of the light, not the timing of the light.
Yeah, the time is fine, but I think Osceola is South Beach Parkway. There's like about a quarter of the
green
light.
lights kind of.
Yeah, so the LEDs are burning out, so
Some of
eventually...
the shade covers are off too.
Right, you notice that?
Yeah.
And it's all over the city, so I don't know what their policy is of if there's any preventive maintenance or if they just are reactive and come out when it's broken. But these ones are starting to get dangerous looking.
DOT has asset management contracts for, that they're supposed to be monitoring them, but, so they outsource it, so.
Gotcha.
It's typically, you gotta, if you call, they'll do it, but they're supposed to be doing it.
Okay.
But also it's a cost analysis on theirs that, you know, they're not jumping right in because it's just a long-term cost, but there's two, depending on which asset management company it is, DBI or, I'm not gonna remember the other name, but if you call maintenance, they'll do it.
Okay. And we'll have, I'm sure, our Public Works Director's taking some notes, so I'll get with him tomorrow on that.
And nodding too.
And nodding. That's good. He's awake. Bill, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay.
Would you like me to step back so quick?
Yeah.
Why don't I do
Pull one up to the cable quick. A couple of things. This is kind of a more bang for the buck situation. We just had a special meeting with the CRA to discuss, first off, everybody, this is Cliff Shepard. Hi, guys.
Hi, Cliff.
Cliff may be a new face to you, but Cliff has actually done legal consulting work for the CRA since at least 2011 with Mr. Lindorf and actually with myself and the former city manager. Several years ago, we came up with the interlocal agreement to allow us to spend TIF monies downstream for stormwater improvements. Cliff's firm helped us do that. First off, we just had a very good meeting with the CRA. They approved my contracting with Mr. Shepard's firm to do basically a consolidation of the existing plan so we can figure out what is left to be done that's already approved, what doesn't need to be done, what statutorily cannot be done, what is outdated. We need to have that as a platform by which the CRA can then begin to proactively say, these are what we would like to remove. Mr. Shepard may say, look, there are certain things in here that do need to be removed based on statutory changes. One of the changes, the original plans weren't based on any kind of height cap, so there were certain provisions in the original 1987 plan that weren't based on high rises necessarily, but they had a market absorption of X amount of square feet within a certain area, and that may not be valid given the fact that you can't put that size building in that particular area. So that type of thing we're going to be expecting from them. We've got an initial estimate from him that their firm's worth is roughly about 130 hours, so that's going to put it in the $25,000 to $30,000 time frame. So the other reason I'm here tonight is to just put a name with a face. This contract will be approved by the CRA, but because the CRA follows city purchasing policy, it also needs to go to the city council for approval. So I just wanted people to be aware that when it comes up, it won't be the first time we've talked about it. Let me see. And as long as Cliff's here, I know one of the big things, I actually listened twice to the October 27th briefing. It was the one when Karen was here, when the city manager was out on the conference, and we started talking about empowering the CRA versus taking over the CRA. One point that came up was the concern that Denise briefed y'all on in her memo about the legislature has put in that new 2039 expiration date for CRAs, which right now would put us roughly 19 years from now, whereas up until the last legislative session, both of our CRAs the TIF funds were supposed to expire in 2047. So that's a huge change. That's a chunk of 17 years that we thought we would normally have going forward, both districts. And I just as soon you hear it from Cliff than from Cliff telling me on the phone to telling you but just to tell you what council needs to do. I thought it was a little bit more of a drawn-out effort, but with that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
It's very simple. First of all, thank you for seeing me today. The answer is that you need to simply find a simple majority vote, agree to recognize, I guess, what was your original expiration date, is it 47 or something?
Yes, sir.
Because in the absence of that, the pre-existing one that was already part of the plan would have been required to adopt the plan has been overruled by the statute unless you, by majority vote, agree that, yeah, no, we're going to go with the original date. And so the other question that was asking me was, well, do we need to do it for each plan, or can we do it as one vote for all the plans? And the answer is, you could do it as one vote for all plans, but for clear record, you probably should, okay, this is for the downtown plan, and this is for the beaches plan, or whatever you call them. I don't know what their various names are. And once you do it, you're good. One of the things that I had mentioned to Bill is that the FRA, who I'm the general counsel for, do y'all know what FRA is? Florida Redevelopment Association. It's kind of the umbrella over all these things around the state. Asked us to do a memo on this question when the law changed because there was a lot of concern. Hey, does that mean everybody's CRA goes out of business in 2039? And the answer is no, as long as you do the simple majority vote to keep the date you had originally. And so that memo is available. I told them that I would send them an email to that effect after I got the opportunity to get in front of the computer again, which is usually where I spend all my day.
So that's basically, I just wanted to give you a heads up on that, and a heads up that his contract, though approved by the CRA, does still have to come through city council, so I imagine both of those items, maybe not on the same agenda, but I'd like to get both of those on before the city council in February. So just to give you all a heads up, and as long as Cliff's here, without opening up the floor to any questions ever related to CRAs, if there's anything specific that came out of that briefing or something else that you might want to know, it's a good opportunity, like I said, get more bang from this travel trip.
What would you say we couldn't ask?
No, just anything global about CRAs in general that would take more than the 15 or 20 minutes we've got before the next council meeting.
I mean, I always had one question. I was always trying to figure out what percentage of CRAs are separate boards versus the city council where
Very
we're
small.
a dual house. I was told
Very
recently it was 3%.
Yeah, it's very small. Now, there is a much larger percentage on which, in addition to elected officials, there may be some non-elected additional board members. So if this is a council of 7, you might have 9 on the CRA board and have 2 of them being from the community or who are from the district. Or, another example, one of the CRAs we have, which is in a charter county like you, had to get a delegation from that county, said that in order for it to get the delegation, we need a representative from the county that sits on your CRA board. So we have that person lives in our city, but works for the county and serves on the CRA board as an additional member to kind of keep an eye on things. And so that's much more common, but a fully, completely unrelated CRA board in terms of members of the community that aren't elected officials, that is in the substantial minority.
How many total CRAs are there?
God, I don't know. I can,
In the 200.
How much?
200. Now, I think that's districts and not agencies, because
Right.
like our city, we do 2. Jacksonville, I think the one agency.
I mean, so we're only looking at like five total, 5 or so
it's a
total.
small number. I mean, I can call Carol this morning and probably get that number on the phone and get it to you if that's a significant.
I can reach out to her also.
But it's really small.
And that's the gist I got going through the administrative training. It's just that I was the only person holding up my hand for all these questions, and they're like, well, we won't gloss over that, you can just talk to us after class. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Easy crowd.
Easy moment.
Those guys are tough.
Yeah, that's good, though, they were. Yeah. It's a good meeting. All right, thank
Thank you
y'all.
guys.
Thank you
Appreciate it.
very much.
Nice to see you all.
Mike, are you and the guys back there?
What's that?
Do you have anything else?
I was going to see if there's anything else council wanted to talk about. The one last thing I had was, I know one of the things the council wanted to do was reserve some time where the council could talk about council issues. Right now, the next one we have scheduled is for March, and it's been a few months since we've had one. Chris has them laid out. I want to say it's like 3 times a year, once every 4 months. And the question is that too far apart for this group? Do you want to have an open forum more frequently than that, where we either reserve half or all of a council briefing for you to talk about whatever you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good idea, it was good to do that.
Yeah, I brought this up with Mike because we were in that IMO class, the Institute for Elected Municipal Officials, and that was one of the things that he talked about, was that the council needs to have time to talk,
Yep.
because we can't talk otherwise. So whether it's in a briefing or whether it's on the council meeting agenda, to have, because Atlantic Beach does, at the end of their commission agenda, they always have, you know, communications item where the city commissioners can bring up whatever they want to bring up. So if we wanted to do briefing time, but I mean, I think for a lot of us that are new, I'd like for us to do it a little more frequently than,
Once every 3 months,
yeah.
or once every 4 months, yeah.
Once every 2
And I
months.
think it could help us too, I mean, just from a, you know, collegial standpoint and working together and, you know.
Absolutely, yeah, I mean, it's a very important role we should be, or thing that we should be doing. I mean, I think, I'd be down for doing it every month, but I mean, if that's,
Yeah.
if that's too much, let me know.
I think the issue with every month means that I'm only down to 1 briefing per month that I have the ability to relay information to you all. And
Yeah, maybe
that's
just a
probably
portion
not
then.
enough.
Well, like you
half a
said,
briefing.
we did half a
Yeah, we
meeting
talked
and
about
see
it.
how that works, and then,
Do you want me to try that once a month, taking like half of a briefing and reserving that for council?
yeah.
Yeah, we'll see how it works, and then if it does, if it's not, if it's too much time, then we could always change it.
And we'll start that in 4 months.
And I do prefer,
That's a joke.
I
Make sure
do
you pay
prefer
attention.
doing it in this format though,
Yes.
versus on the day.
Yeah.
It would be in this form,
Right.
absolutely.
Have you thought about the, that fifth Monday a couple times a year? Just having a,
believe
we're
I
together
asked-
for a long time?
I believe I asked that question of this group earlier on, and the answer was no.
Mm.
I asked if there was,
Yeah.
I asked if there was-
yeah, no.
I asked if there was an opportunity to add an extra meeting in every so often, and the answer was no.
I mean, but
Twice a
this
month
one, like we
was-
specifically say, 'cause it seems that Monday, everybody wants it to be done on a Monday, and a Monday afternoon, don't pick any of the days, so it's gonna be, except for days, Tuesday. But that fifth Monday
I'll let
is
you
like
all
a
talk
free
about that.
Monday. Every once in a while, a month has a fifth Monday, and like, we don't see each other for like 3 weeks, and it's like, I
It's
miss you
terrible,
guys.
isn't it?
Can we fix that
Yeah.
problem right now?
It's typically twice a year.
Yeah, twice a year, but,
Calendar
Yeah,
like,
basis.
but that would be a longer, time together. You know, we're not just trying to get out of here by 7, and then we don't wanna talk after we spent 4 or 5 hours together between the 2 rooms.
Right. So when's the next fifth Monday?
And I don't think, I mean, I know we were trying to stick with Mondays and it wasn't necessarily because we couldn't do any other day, but it was because we were already here
Yeah.
and we used to have to deal with, can you do Thursday at 3 o'clock? No. Can you do Tuesday at 10 o'clock? No. And then start all over again. So it was just that, we were already here on Mondays, so let's just.
I thought some really wanted it on Mondays, because like, I think it was you said you already opened up your schedule on Mondays.
Well, yes, but that was because we kept having, can you do Tuesday at 5:32? Can you do, and then it was like just this constantly shifting.
Yeah.
We just all kind of mentally block out Mondays when we have council meetings that we're gonna have a briefing, and that's really been beneficial to do it this way so far.
Yeah.
March is the next one with 5.
March?
March is the next one.
Fifth Monday, I mean, that's fine with me.
I'm going.
I just, you know, I travel a lot, I have a lot of meetings, and I just always leave Monday open.
Yeah, I'm so,
Yeah, so I mean, if we can keep Monday, that would be great for me, because I just got too much of a diverse schedule.
March, June, August. I'm telling you, this year
Lots
just
of 'em.
Really?
packed with Mondays.
There's
November?
one
There's
every
lots
week.
of Mondays.
There's 52.
One coming up in 6 days.
It's amazing, like tons of 5s.
Okay, so we're gonna do the fifth Monday in March.
Fifth Monday, well, that's all up to you. Right now, I've got written
I
down,
won't be here.
Well, I guess it just
I'm on
depends on
vacation.
if you've got so much stuff that we need to add another Monday in.
I don't-
I've got, well, that's not so much for me as much as that would be for you.
Yeah.
For the 7 of you to have a conversation unimpeded
whole time,
for up to
yeah.
an hour and a half if necessary, or
Right.
longer, depending on what you want to do. But what I've got written down so far is reserve 1/2 of a briefing once per month for the council to have 45 minutes to talk about whatever you want to talk about.
I think we should give that a shot before
Yeah.
we add
Yeah.
it.
And then
all
the
over.
June one, we can do the June one, if that's the next one, we can add the hour and a half for June.
My only concern is with everything that's on our plates, is you're not having enough time to get across everything that you need to get across, and, but, yeah, we can try it.
Give this a shot.
We've got 20 minutes right now.
We could be here all night.
Yeah. We got 20
Actually,
minutes.
you do have, well, 15 if we want a 5-minute break.
Okay.
But if there's anything you want to talk about over the next 10 to 15 minutes, now's the opportunity.
Yeah, are we, or are we gonna take a break? Do you want?
I'm for break.
All right.
What about, what, you guys?
Oh, you guys are like students.
They all come.
It's been a long day, it's been a long day.
Mike, I
No, but I mean,
You have a
we
question?
can break early.
Our city attorney does have a question he'd like to pose to
Okay.
council.
I get emails from the Florida League of Cities for the legislative updates and urgent updates. Do you all receive those?
Yeah.
Okay, because if you needed me to, I could forward them to you, but if you do not need me to forward those to you, I won't.
Today, House Bill 1110 passed.
10-11?
Yeah, 1011, and I wrote every single one of the members that I was going to be there. I've been averaging 2 days a week in Tallahassee, and just coming back. We got a real problem with this, guys.
I know,
Short-term
the
rental.
Senate bill passed
And
too last
You know who's
week.
driving it?
Diaz?
Jason
And Fisher.
Fisher.
Oh.
And
They don't have a lot of short-term rentals on there.
well, not only that, he was obviously working for special interest to get money to run for Aaron seat. So, you know, that's one of our own, basically, that's doing this to us. So it's really important that we ignite a fire, and I'll be at every meeting they have unless I have something conflicting here. But
Have you talked
I
to
sent
him?
I sent a long
Jason
email
Fisher?
to
not yet.
everybody on the at the initial meetings on that, whatever the board was. And
Senate.
just
Yeah, the
kind of
Senate
told them
bill.
what we were, told them what our issues
Right.
were.
Science
I
and
did too.
And the
technology.
part that,
I testified on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
But
Well-
no, that's good.
But Aaron and Corder are, they're on our side, so.
Well, I'll keep piping information in.
Well,
you guys
and that's
too.
not the only one, the Bert Harris
Bert Harris.
bill is a really bad one too. that
And the
we
food
need to be
truck.
concerned about. Well, the
There's a
food
food
truck
truck
is
one
a
that's-
new one.
I've already
That's-
talked to
Okay.
Chris
Did you?
and
Okay.
Mike about that, because some of us, we all went through this together. The brick and mortar guys were really upset. And so we found a meeting grant, and now the state wants to come in once again
And take it away.
and preempt our ability to govern. And, Lord knows, you can't make one application apply all in Putnam County and in Jacksonville Beach. It doesn't work that way. But so squeaky wheels, we all gotta be squeaky wheels. And I'll do a better job of getting you guys copies of stuff I'm sending in too, so that you can see what's going on.
And I guess somebody in Tampa or somewhere, they did a poll that 75% of people think that short-term rental decisions should be made at the local level and not at that level. Not at the state level, but,
I took-
poll is a poll.
Last year, you guys remember Matt Laney, I took him with me to Tallahassee to testify before the Senate. It was the last Senate subcommittee prior to it going to the floor, and then TP'd it, or temporarily postponed it, which meant it wasn't going to do anything that year. So I've convinced the League of Cities to come out here and videotape it. You guys remember the emotional, when he, had just a very, very poignant speech. They're going to come out and film that and take it back so they can play it at these committee meetings as well. But if you know of anything in your districts or citywide where this is happening again, where an LLC comes in and buys a single-family home in a neighborhood, please let me know, because as many examples as we can get is beneficial for us. So.
How has that been going, the registration process and everything like that?
There's been very little or very few applications submitted.
Okay.
Heather and I spoke about it last week, and she said maybe 6.
Yeah.
Wow.
When's the deadline?
But
Yeah,
they're
it's
also
not
very
31st of
time-consuming.
January, I thought.
Forgot the deadline.
Bill Mann had told me, or Heather said that if they didn't submit their applications by the 31st of January, then they would start contacting all the ones
Right.
that they know about, yeah.
Yeah. It hasn't been a tidal wave of applications, so.
That company we hired is gonna get some good money.
Right.
That's too many. Don't they take a cut of that, of everyone they find? Is that how that works?
I'm not sure how that works either.
I think it
That
was-
might be in there.
I think it was a percentage, yeah.
So,
So,
like
like,
we're losing,
as if they're
Fee for
uncovering,
service.
Well,
yeah.
yeah, those and those people that aren't submitting applications, but they should be, yeah.
It's in our best
There's a
interest
lot of
to
those.
try to do it
Voluntary
ourselves,
compliance.
because we're going to lose whatever percentage to that company when they find it, which is
I thought they were just identifying all of them. They're gonna send a happy little letter too?
Did they change the grandfathering date, but the grandfathering's still in there, right?
The grandfather's there for 2011. I've been asking, both on the conference call and I asked before the last committee testimony as well, that they honor any previously existing ordinance prior to this session that comply with state law. Because there's no reason for them to pick a year arbitrarily and say 2011 is a good year. So in my discussions today with general counsel for Florida League of Cities, he said, let's use that as our parachute. You know, if we go into the last push, we'll pull that out, but we don't want to lead with it.
But it's just challenging for Jacksonville Beach just because the other communities surrounding us have banned them, so we get them all.
Right, right.
Ponte Vedra has them, right?
Final meter has some, yeah.
Yeah, but they haven't banned, they didn't ban them, so this
No.
might be something we want to look a little bit more south.
Ponte
I know
Vedra
Because
is,
it's a county, it's not
It's part of the county.
It's not, it's not incorporated. Right?
that's exactly right. You're right on the button. I'm actually doing a speech to the Rotary Club. They asked me to talk to them about incorporation because they're kind of like hanging out at the end of the county and really not getting any support from their county staff or county commissioners. So we're going to talk about what we've done as a city and let them make their own comparisons. But I think they're looking at doing something similar.
Yeah,
over
they
at
last
Ponte
time.
Vedra. Pardon me?
We tried before and it failed.
I don't know. You gotta get the Senate behind you, and you gotta get the governor behind you, and the whole nine yards to do it.
I mean, it failed at the local level. They didn't
Oh,
want to.
really? Yeah.
They decided that they didn't want, they added taxation.
I bet you they feel a little different with that beach eroding under those homes.
If you went any traffic.
Sure. But, okay. Yeah, I'll try and do a better job of keeping you guys posted with stuff that I'm doing. I know you all are doing things too, but,
By the way, there's something I wanted to bring up that's not legislative. Can I bring it up really quick? You've been copied on the email because Neptune Beach is wanting to purchase something for the crosswalk that goes from Jack's Beach to Neptune Beach there in front of
Rapid
Fletcher High
flashing
School.
beacon.
Yeah, RRFB, because what they've got there is not working, and she's, I guess it's the planner. Is she the planner for Neptune Beach? I can't remember what her
Assistant
title
Public
is.
Works Director.
And anyway, so they've approached the school, Neptune Beach and us, and I suggested that they approach Atlantic Beach too, for all the communities to go in together to get these RRFBs, and there's two different models that they're looking at, so I don't know how we proceed with that, because they're trying to get some conversation going about that, because right now as it is, the kids are not pushing the button to cross that crosswalk, and
I
so,
went to the same school. We didn't have buttons.
I know.
We
We just started across that street.
I had band practice, I had baseball practice, you know.
So she's got two quotes. One is for bollards that have like a laser in between them, and if you walk between the bollards, then the RRFBs start flashing. Or the other kind is a RF kind or whatever that actually senses somebody that's approaching the crosswalk, and then they start flashing. So anyway, that's something that's been brought to all the cities, and I don't know how we need to
I would
proceed.
encourage, because when we first had this discussion, when the first discussion came out, about putting lights and crosswalks there, there's very specific criteria that has to be met. And I think Pat Dooley at the time was chief, and there was a bunch of criteria that has to be met. I'm sure it's the same now. If we make any modifications, I think we ought to let GP or somebody from the police department kind of manage the.
I've actually got a luncheon tomorrow with all three city managers from the beaches, so
That
I'll
would
talk
be
about
good.
it with them.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? You got 10 minutes.
I'll give you two good positive updates.
All right.
Yeah.
The city of Jacksonville Beach is awesome.
Newsflash.
I did an analysis basically of some of our litigation and claim status, and I would say that our claims and litigation that we've confronted with respect to our Parks and Recs department is excellent. We hardly have any claims of premises liability or injuries or accidents. We literally.
So we're over here knocking the table.
Yeah, where's the
But I just wanted to share that with you because I think that that indicates the Parks and Recs inspection and maintenance and repair duties are being followed, and I go over that with Jason, and we have a meeting in a week to just be sure that we still maintain that. And you look at the amount of users of our Parks and Rec areas, and we have possibly only one legitimate claim as it stands. So looking back in the past few years, I mean, I just think that Parks and Rec department has been incredible. You know, just past weekend, you go to South Beach Park, I saw hundreds of people there, and I just thought, boy, this department's doing great. So just good thumbs up on very risk management with respect to Parks and Rec. And then in March, we're going to have a workers' compensation seminar, which is going to help educate and inform the city departments, supervisors, and the police department on work comp laws, and provide them with a real, from what I gather, a first time of real instruction on how the law applies to the city, what the requirements are for the city with respect to the roles and obligations for the employer and the employee, so that we're doing the right thing, following the law with respect to what the employee is entitled to, but then also having department supervisors get a clear understanding of the work comp laws, because they have indicated to me that they don't know how it works, and it seems to be a mystery to them. So in March, they're going to be educated and informed on that. And second phase of that, and GP seemed very happy about this, which is the presumption law in work comp. The presumption law speaks to essentially a whole different category of law that applies to police official, law enforcement officials, fire department, which we don't worry about anymore, but our law enforcement officers with respect to heart disease or PTSD, and there's these presumptive health issues that fall under the presumption law with respect to our law officers. So GP is excited about that. He's going to have every one of his commanders there. So it's not completely set in stone yet, but it's in the works. So these are two great new things that we're working on.
Are you qualified or certified to do the annual training for us for ethics?
I'm not, no sir.
I suggest you look into what the requirements are.
Three of us just got
Do
it.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
We're good.
Online, is the way to go.
Yep.
It's like driver's ed, like, or doing
Super easy.
Yeah.
the driving course.
I don't know anything about
Oh,
that.
well, I mean, it's been a long time.
You can
And
go online if you're a driver.
Chris has adjusted
Not
our,
driver's ed, but.
Chris has adjusted our procedure on an open hearing. So wait until I asked you for the motion.
Okay.
All right, ready? Great. Everybody got enough time? We need 5 after?
What do you